Welcome to this very first episode of the Mindful Money Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the state of the union, the state of the economy, specifically, how much have Americans really racked up student debt? Why is it that there still seems to be financial issues in the world when this is one of the most established industries that exist? Why is it that so many people are stuck in a scarcity mentality, and what can we do about it? And how can millennials solve this problem? So, welcome everybody. I am Chris Fern. Welcome everybody. I am Chris Fern. I'm your host for today's podcast. And let's kick off the podcast today with our Mindful Money Mind Shift. Now, what is a mind shift? It's a lot like a paradigm shift. Let's kick it off with our first Mindful Money Mind Shift. Consider this. Most people, when they get paid, let's kick it off today with our first Mindful Money Mind Shift. So what is it? Let's kick it off today with our very first Mindful Money Mind Shift. So consider this. Every single year, right around the 1st of April, right about when this podcast is being recorded, we do something that every American dreads. We do taxes. Why is it that taxes are so dreadful? Why is it that even if we have an accountant, it's just, it's that time of year again? And how does this really factor into poverty? How does this really factor in to people's money management, to abundance, to being able to create a new financial future? That's the mind shift. There was a study done by Princeton psychologist Eldar Shafir. His study looked at how deprivation wreaks havoc on cognition and decision-making. And he explored the relationship between scarcity and between how people interpret the decisions that they make. He explored the relationship between scarcity and decision-making and explored ideas about how to scarcity-proof the world. At the end of a write-up on this study, he says a very important quote. We would not charge people. We wouldn't charge people $200 or $300 to join a benefits program such as food stamps, because the whole point is that they have no money. But when you give them a very complicated form, or demand that they be somewhere exactly on time 3 days in a row, you're imposing a massive bandwidth tax. Instead of taxing them with money, you're taxing them bandwidth, which is also something they don't have enough of. So you're creating a situation where they're bound to fail. We propose, this is Shafir proposing, that policymakers do all that they can to make the world a place where when I fail for a moment because of mismanaging my scarcity, there's a way to climb out rather than sink further. And pun intended, let that sink in for a second. Really. Even for those of us that are wealthy, when tax time rolls around, it's tax time. It's this bandwidth tax that he talks about. And what is the effect of that? Stress, anxiety. If you've ever been in a situation with limited money, you encounter these taxes, these bandwidth taxes all the time. And it's not taxes on your money. It's taxes on your mind. It's taxes on the way you organize your thoughts. It's taxes on worrying about the form that's in front of you and whether or not you're going to be able to buy food rather than how you're going to get out of that situation. There was a time in my life when I was on food stamps. And in order for me to continue to get food stamps, I had to prove my income. But I had a business that had income sporadically. And I had a business that had income at the most odd times. One month I would get $2,000. The next month I would get $300. And when I reported that, it happened to be a good time, and they said, hey, your income doesn't match the average that you reported. Now you have to give us every single justification for every single expense and every single piece of revenue on your bank account. That's an example of a bandwidth tax. We cannot expect the people of this world to climb out of the hole that they live in. If you, the government, or whoever, the employer, the entrepreneur, anybody, think about this, guys, that are out there running your own businesses. You cannot expect somebody to perform well when you're imposing this bandwidth tax. That's the concept behind systems. That's the concept behind IT. That's the concept behind programming. The whole reason programmers go to school, I myself being one of those, is to learn how to make things as efficient as possible. And many people say, hey, that one extra piece of output that your program doesn't really make a big deal. It's no big deal. A lot of people say that one extra piece of code doesn't really have an impact. But when you look at it, when you really observe, that one extra piece of code run 1 billion times, even if it takes 1/10 of a second, is 1 million seconds or more. That's a problem. That one extra form can wreak havoc on somebody who's already taxed. So as a guy with a strong background in technology, I set out on a mission to correct that problem, to really drive home, specifically in the area of money, systems that can relieve those bandwidth taxes and create more freedom in our lives for us to choose the things that we want to choose rather than the form or the bill or the next expense coming through the door. And this is a real problem. So now let's start to look at some of how much of a problem this is for millennials, specifically my generation and the generation that's coming after me. Let's really start to look at this because there are a huge number of misunderstandings. And we're expecting millennials to really bail us out. But how can that possibly happen if we're so caught up in this bandwidth tax? Let's look at some examples. Well, according to some research by the United States Chamber Foundation, 66% of millennials believe that they're going to be among the top 20% of earners. Now, you can't do that. You can't say that 66% of people are going to be in the top 20% of people. 66% of people are going to be in 66% of people. But what's happening here is there's an expectation that the current system of going to college, getting a job, getting a degree, making a bunch of money is going to work. And there's a difference of 46%. How is that possibly going to work? That's just one piece. Consider that being the predominant mindset. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll just go back to school. I'll just get a degree. But what happens when you do that? Well, not currently, in 2014, now it's 2016, but in 2014, student loan debt was at 1.2 trillion with a T dollars in America. 5 years before that, I can't count. I meant 8 years before that. Student loan debt was at 461 billion. That's with a B. That's less than half. $461 billion. So in 8 years, we went from $461 billion of debt to $1.2 trillion of debt. More people were going to school. More people thought that they could get that job. More people thought that they would be successful. So much so that 66% of us think that they're going to be in the top 20%. That makes no sense. Let's look at some other pieces of information here. Now, in a study done by In a study done by the Pew Research Center out of Dallas, one of the biggest financial concerns of millennials is student loans. That's 36%. Some studies go between 36 and 45%. That's still a huge chunk of change. Student loans. That $1.2 trillion is the biggest concern. Instead of living their lives, paying off, yeah, exactly. I almost just said, instead of living their lives and paying off debt. I'm even stuck in this at times. Look, you've got 36% of people concerned with student loans. 36% of the paycheck goes to student loans. They're in a mindset where it's just to pay the bills. They're just trying to get by. The average income for a millennial in the U.S. is $30,000. And according to some research by Elite Daily, 51.8% of millennials have less than $1,000 in savings. So maybe you're starting to see how this just doesn't make sense, right? And I'm going to stop rattling off statistics because I think that really proves the case. Like, I really think that the classic ways of looking at money don't work anymore. We've been taught that you should grow up, go to school, get a job, do well at that job, make a lot of money, maybe go in some more debt, and make sure you have money in savings. But you can't do that. We've created an expectation for our children where 66% of them think that they're going to be in the top fifth of the income earners. And I keep saying it because it's just that unbelievable. When I found that statistic, I couldn't believe it myself. So what can we do about that? How can we adjust? That's why we're here. That is why this podcast was created. I really believe that with a few tweaks to how we look at things, and by filling a gap that isn't filled yet, we can create a new reality. And that's a reality where this bandwidth tax does not exist. That's a reality where the current way of thinking about finances doesn't exist. So let's take a look at what finances really are. Because in order to talk about how the millennial generation can change things, we really need to understand where things started. Think back to before money. I know you guys weren't around then, but imagine a world where money didn't exist. Hell, use the Amish if it helps. So if I have 3 goats and you want my goats, and you know how to build a barn, and I have 46 horses, and I need a barn for my horses, but you want my goats, what would happen? Well, we'd probably have a conversation about how awesome your barn building skills are and how useless my goats are. They just sit around and goat all day. And we'd probably come to some arrangement without money of how you can build a barn for my horses and I'll give you my goats. Well, that's all that, dude. That's all that money is it's a exchange. It's just an exchange. But it just so happens that lately, it seems like it's the only exchange, right? It seems like it's the only thing that we can do to get what we need. We might trade like magic cards with our friends or, decorations or like food. Sometimes, if you need to, I guess. But, money, they say, I don't know what they say about money. They say a lot of things about money, but ultimately money is king. Money is the thing that we try to get. I need more money. I need to be rich. What do you really need? What do you really want? Rich so that you can have a what? Rich so that you can do what? Like, what's the point? Do you want a barn? Do you want goats? Do you want chickens? Do you want something else? Hopefully, in today's society, most people I know don't want chickens or goats. But you see the point. What is it that you want that the trade for money gets you? That's really where things have to start. Because until you know what you're trying to get, you won't see any other way to get it but money. Money will seem like the ultimate, but what happens when you have money? There's a reason why people that win the lottery don't stay rich. And it's because not only do they just blow their money because they don't know what they want, they also know how to save and invest their money, which is we could spend a whole podcast talking about that. And we will. But think about that exchange. Think about when you want something, how else might you be able to get it? That's part one of this conversation. The other part is, how can we take the concept of money, how can we create a new reality where we're not bogged down by this bandwidth tax, by student loans, etc. Where, okay, let me take a different perspective. Let's step back and look at what you are taught today about money. If I go and I look for a financial education course, chances are I'm going to find one of two things. I'm going to find one of three things, actually. I'm going to find, here's how to write a check so I can pay people, right? Because that's important. That's the number one skill we should know how to learn, right? I'm going to find, here's how to manage your 401k so that when you work for somebody, so that you can pay people, you know what to contribute. And, here's some companies and whatever. Here's what an interest rate is so that you don't get screwed, even though, $1.2 trillion in debt. Okay. Or the third is, here's how to write a business plan. And I haven't done enough research to know what percentage of people knows how to write business plans, but in my conversations, it's not very many. Here's how to write a business plan to get the money you need, to do the thing you want, because you know what you want when you're asking for the money, and you're more likely to get it if you're specific. But there's nobody having the conversation of what to do once you have money. Once you get that paycheck because you're working for somebody else, or you're working your part-time gigs so you can buy your pizza because you're in college, not that I condone pizza, or you're an entrepreneur paying yourself because you started your business, what do you do next? How do you handle the expenses that come up as a result of that? How do you handle not reacting and responding instead? And that's the philosophy that we talk about with mindful money. More specifically, what we get into is, that's really what we talk about with mindful money, is how can you be mindful? How can you use some of the computer science techniques without even knowing computer science to streamline what you do, to do it more efficiently, to do it in a way that doesn't stress you out and impose any kind of tax on your brain, so that you can spend your time thinking about the things that you want, getting the things that you want, and just paying the people that don't accept you trading goats for barns. Like, that's really what it comes down to, right? You can't go to the electric company and, trade them web development services or, tree planting services or goats for electricity. That just doesn't work that way. Some people demand the ultimate currency. So how do you manage those people? Well, we really need to flip things on its head. We really need to look at how this concept of money, this ultimate thing, can be less important in our mental landscape, in our bandwidth. And when we make that flip, when we use the principles that we talk about in Mindful Money, we will be able to start to focus on the why, start to focus on the vision. We'll be able to start to build, to know, and to build the future that we want. We'll be able to relieve ourselves of half, at least, of the bandwidth tax that's out there. So, I'm going to give you 3 tips here in this episode, in this very first episode of Mindful Money, the Mindful Money. So, I'm going to give you 3 tips here in this very first episode of the Mindful Money podcast. It's going to help you do just that. These are tips that you may have heard before. These are tips that, you may have heard in other podcasts or on the internet somewhere. There are way more little principles and tips that are going to be on our website, that are going to be on our e-commerce and e-learning platform. It's going to be in our app that we have in the pipeline, and that are taught in our free 3-day course, which you can find at www.practicemindfulmoney.com. But let's just get a little introduction, because you can't start to make a change. I'm not going to give you a podcast telling you that you need to make a change without giving you the tools to make a change. So let's just start stupid simple. And the very first thing that you want to do, I'll just go in order, is make a budget if you don't already have one. And, there's a website out there. There's stuff that talks about how to make a budget. So I'm not going to go into how to do that, but do it. Just make the budget. Know how much you need every year for your current life. And here's the thing that they may not tell you. Maybe you'll find it, but always overestimate expenses and underestimate income. Why? Because if you overestimate expenses and underestimate income, you might feel like things are tight for a while, and they might be, but you'll always have more than you thought. And that's really what Mindful Money is about, is giving you more than what you think you have. Being surprised, feeling abundant, feeling like you're always taken care of. Because you know what? Think about it. You're here now. You have gotten this far. And if you weren't okay, you wouldn't have gotten this far. No matter how anxious you got, no matter how bandwidth taxed you were, reactionary you were always okay. And you always will be okay. So, simply create that budget, and let's say round up to the nearest $25. If you have an expense that's $26, it's now $50. And just give that a shot. Then see how much you have left. This is part of the same tip number 1 here. See how much you have left. And if you have a positive amount left over, Mindful Money will work for you. If you have a positive amount left over, head on over, take our free 3-day course. We'll be able to tell you exactly how much you can expect to spend every 2 weeks on your life. And we can start to vision out that future that you want with no bandwidth tax. So start there, make a budget. The second thing, tip number 2 here, is open up a bank account at an online-only bank. It's not your credit union, it's not your local bank, it's not your whatever. Online only. The bank that we recommend generally is Ally.com. They have always been an online-only bank. I don't know of any Ally branch. Why? Why an online-only bank? Well, generally they have lower overhead. Generally, they will be able to charge you higher interest rates for your savings accounts. But more importantly, The reason why we want to do an online-only bank is to get money that you will be saving once you know that future that you want, and get that out of sight. You ever lost a thing because you didn't know where it was long enough, or found money in your pocket or in your couch, or even in school, lost your pen or whatever? Why? It wasn't in front of you. You didn't see it. Same with money. In today's world, where half of our mind is spent trying to pay back people, and we probably log into our bank accounts multiple times a week. On average, millennials think about money 4 times a day. So we log into our bank accounts probably once a day, once every couple days. If you log in and you don't see money, or if you log in and some of your money isn't there, it'll be a lot easier to forget about. And that's the point when you're trying to save up for that future that you want. That's why 401k is in a separate account, but we're going to take this many steps further with our platform and put your entire future in another account, multiple other accounts, in fact. So just start by opening up savings and checking, one checking, multiple savings. Start with 2 at an online only bank. And just start simply by transferring $5 into that online only bank the day you get paid. Now, you've heard of savings programs. Everybody tells you to put money away and save up for emergency expenses and whatever, but this is just part of a bigger strategy, right? Saving up for emergency expenses, no kidding. You want money saved, whatever. You want to make sure you have money when you don't have money, of course. But this really leads into point number 3, which is make a list of everything that you want in your life. Make a list of everything, every object, every experience that you want to have. And it's going to be a big list. And if it's not, we have meditations available on our website to help you get that vision. But an easy way to do this, especially if you're strapped for cash, is think back for the past 3 months and what have you said that you can't afford? That should be on the list, right? So you make this list. And we have a great tool that allows you to sort this list by happiness, importance, and urgency. This is part of the free 3-day course that you can take as well. It keeps track of all the stuff for you in a profile online. And this list is going to be what all of these savings accounts, you started with 2, and in step 2 there, all these savings accounts are going to create for you. These savings accounts are going to facilitate you getting these things that you didn't think you could ever get. And we're just going to start with $5. Right? So that's the 3 things. It's very simple. It'll put you in a much better space. It'll make you much more mindful and aware of what you're spending and how you're spending it. And your budget can simply be an estimate. There's tons of tools out there that help you. We've got blogs on our website, but your budget can simply be an estimate. And in that estimate, you overestimate expenses and underestimate income. Tip number 2, create an account at an online-only bank. Again, we recommend ally.com. We don't get any, it's not an endorsement. We just recommend it. You don't get any commission from that or anything like that. Just go sign up. 1 checking account, 2 savings accounts. Transfer $5 into each savings account every time you get paid. You could set that on automatic if you get salary or a biweekly paycheck. And that's only $10. Like, dude, that's like 4 Gatorades. Like, just do it. And make a list of everything that you thought that you couldn't afford in the past 3 months. Be sure to include the future that you want for yourself as well. So, thank you for joining us here on this very first episode of the Mindful Money Podcast. We've got a lot of great stuff for you coming up in subsequent episodes, including the introduction of a brand new co-host, international traveler, and holistic doctor, Loren Lorino. She is one of the most powerful manifesting forces that I've come to know, and she's able to seemingly create money out of thin air. So she's going to be joining us. Also, be sure to tune in for more of the history of money, my personal story, explaining specifically why I created this program and how it's helped me transform my life 5 times over, as well as the lives of my family and my friends. You're going to be learning more about the philosophy of money, how people think about it, how it tends to create this sense of scarcity and what we can do about that. And we're going to be bringing on leaders in the areas of coaching, personal development, and personal. And we're going to be giving you more exciting new research that shows how changing our mindset can completely change our reality, how money can literally create happiness. So, if you like this podcast, if you want to learn all those things, be sure to head over to iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe. Click the subscribe button, set yourself to automatically download. Be sure to visit practicemindfulmoney.com 3-day course, which will get you your budget together. It'll get you the vision of the life that you want. It'll get all those things that you didn't think that you could afford put together and consolidated into one amount that you can pay every 2 weeks, as well as give you custom and personalized educational content specifically tailored to you and your beliefs around money. And be sure to pre-register for the app coming up. We've got a great app that'll do a lot of those things that course does, but then also be your financial coaching technology to get you transitioned to paying that one amount every 2 weeks, to keeping this vision for the future that you want, keeping that list of all the things that you create organized, prioritized, and keeping you happy when it comes to how you spend money and what that money specifically represents for you. So again, that's practicemindfulmoney.com. Be sure to head over to iTunes, like, subscribe, comment. We look forward to seeing you on the next Mindful Money podcast.